Hello, Cinth. This is a tutorial on configuring a selectable human ship. Now, there are actually a couple of ways to go about this. This is all done in the Prep project, and incidentally, these are the same steps that any sort of modder would go through as well. So. What I'm going to look at first is the space dock here, which is set up in a way that is, I don't know, legacy, I suppose. And I want to fix that one to work the proper way. And then for the AI Warp Gate, I'll show you how to make something that is hoverable and set up uh, the things that can be human and the things that can never be human. I've got it set up slightly differently just for a tiny bit more efficiency. It doesn't make a huge difference, but you know, it didn't cost me any much time to make, and every little bit helps. So you may have, so just pull up, I guess, what this is going to look like in the end here. Load up the actual game and, you know, the ugly interface at the moment and all that sort of thing. So at the moment, we have some ships that are selectable like this. They don't have any sort of icon above them, no gimbal or anything like that. And then we have other ships that you can either select by dragging the gimbal, or you can click the ship itself. When you hover over it, it tells you what it is, and it's way too small tooltip down there. And then for like the bombers and so on, it's actually not even letting you hover over those. You have to do the gimbal. I'm not sure I'm real thrilled on that, but there was a limit to how. I had my reasons, but I'm not sure I'm real sold on those reasons now. So let's do this. First of all, we have the following layers that are in both projects here. And these are object layers, physics layers. We're not really using physics per se, but we are using collisions, but not in the sense of objects colliding with other objects. That's all handled in our own internal code base in the 2D code base, basically. But rather, in our case, raycasts. So when a player clicks somewhere on their screen, how does it know what object it actually clicked? I clicked this right here, and it hit this bomber, and it didn't hit this guy. And that's because it hit the model collision box in this particular case. But you can see I'm clicking outside the box collider. That's just the Unity editor. In the actual game, you have to hit the box collider. So the box collider, it's a lot more efficient to hit box colliders. So in order to do that, I have it filtering so that when we do raycasts or when we do drag selections, it will only look for certain layers. And so during the midst of battle or whatever, when players are clicking around, or when they're giving right-click orders to say attack something, it automatically kind of pre-filters out things like the background planet, any asteroids, just other stuff that is not interactive in that way. And so, it makes the raycast calls a little bit cheaper. It's not a big deal, but it is there. So what that means is that the layer has to be right for it to actually work. And the reason, oh, interesting. The reason why it's not working at the moment is because it needs to be set as a selectable ship on here, and you go on and say yes, change children. And on the fighters, same deal. Default, selectable ship. Yes, change children. Don't forget to apply. Fighter and bomber. And then next time when we're back in the game, after we rebuild the asset bundle, we should be able to drag select across the individual ships within there, which will cause their entire squad to get selected, of course. And we should be able to click an individual ship, and we should be able to mouse over an individual ship. So if somebody's for some reason having trouble telling what squad a ship belongs to, right now all the ships in a squad, because I've pulled out the Movement Plus code, they're all just sitting on top of one another and not doing any sort of squad-based movement or anything like that. I mean, they move when the squad moves, but they're not interpolating or flying around or anything like that. That's just something I need to do either later today or Monday. But the new curvy stuff is way better, and I've got a better structure for how I want to handle it too. So those ones are for squads of ships that are more than one. When we look at this thing here, this was a light capital ship, but now maybe this will be what this particular type of mercenary group is called. Well, I don't know. There is no light starship anymore in AI War Classic even, but there's also not one in the AI War 2 at all. There's really no analog. And so Blue had made this great model, and I was looking at, oh, whoops, where can we actually use this? And Keith was like, I have no idea either. And so like, well, these would make some good mercenaries. Basically like a mercenary flagship type deal. And so since the original model, or the original sprite that this was the Light Starship was based on an AOR classic came from Tyrian by Daniel Cook as a graphic artist there. I thought, hey, why not call these the Tyranites? And so maybe we'll have a mercenary group called the Tyranites. It's a nice nod to where AR War 1 got some of its free art, which is pretty cool. So anyway, this one has been set up properly, you could see. And then, of course, we've got space stock, which is set up in a legacy fashion. So we need to get this space stock fixed up. There are a couple of parts to each of these things. So first of all, the Arcane Visual Object has to be on the top level object of every pretty much every ship, and I mean, every ship and structure definitely has to have it at the top. It's at the top of every squad. Let's put it that way. And in some cases, you have a squad of one, such as these two guys. The actual ships are underneath there, and they don't have the visual object on it. So this guy's already mostly set up correctly, but the object type that's set here, basic wormhole, single ship, squad of ships, shot, those are all the different things that would be visual objects. The like explosions and so on are visual effects instead, and those are handled with different logic that doesn't, it's more efficient to keep them separate, basically. And none of this has anything to do with actual game logic, by the way. It's all presentation layer stuff. So what it should be is squad of ships. I'm not sure there's actually going to be any case where we want it to be a basic object type. There might be, so I haven't gotten rid of it, but generally speaking, we're going to want it to be a squad of ships. So it needs to have a child to duplicate, which in the case of simply having one child, it won't duplicate anything. So the inner thing here would be the actual space stock. And so I'm going to go ahead and rename that. I'll just call it space stock. Why the heck not? And so then drag that into child to duplicate and apply. I have this marked as static. You may have noticed. I really think that's probably It's probably a dangerous idea. The children were not static. Um, updating a static object's static mesh's position is deadly to the performance and everything. 'Cause it's got to rebuild the static caching. I mean, it helps performance when you have stuff that shares a material and that therefore can be batched together. But um, at one point, like a month and a half ago, maybe I was thinking that maybe using some static geometry would make sense. But that was before getting into uh, LODs as an alternative. I mean, I was already planning on using LODs and used LODs before. Obviously, we use them in Raptor with like chandeliers and stuff, but I hadn't really fully thought it through. So, uh, at any rate, no static, all dynamic. If something's static, that needs to be fixed. So when it comes to this thing, we have the childhood duplicate, which is now called space stock. Because if we get any sort of error messages and it just says inner, it's gonna be like, what? what exactly are we talking about? Inner, inner what? We have this selection 3 thing here. This is a mesh that I made and optimized and made it all nice, and we just don't need them. It's not a very good way to select things, mainly because we can't do it for all ships. Doing it for a squadron just wouldn't look right, I don't think. And doing it for these guys, it still looks a little tacky. I mean, we always could come back to that if we had to for some reason, and then it would just be kind of a circle around the loose squadron of ships like flying around. But I think the gimbal selection is just nicer in general. So bye-bye selection ring. And so then that comes into, yeah, selection circle is missing. Change that to none so that it's not complaining. And then that comes to the icon prefab, which is the gimbal. Now, I'm just going to go over here and click so it takes me to the right spot very quickly. We've got in Arkin Bundle, we've got gimbals here. Now, either you or Blue needs to actually create these icons. And actually, I'll go ahead and change this thing to be Tigerknight leader gimbal. Yeah, there we go. You'll notice down here at the bottom, it's got asset bundle, goodie box. Anything that is linked by, if something is in the goodie box bundle and it references something else like material, texture, whatever, then the material, texture, whatever gets automatically pulled in. Technically, we don't even need to put the gimbals in the goodie box because ships that are referencing will automatically pull them over. But I've been sticking them in there explicitly just for the sake of safety, I guess. So for the big starships and like flagship type things, I've got these stars that we're using for anything that's smaller. Let's take a look here in the models. Arkin models, far zoom. Well, we do have these hexagons. That could work for structures, come to think of it. That's kind of neat. Let's use that. Hadn't planned on using that. This thing has 90 verts, so we're good. No need for you to go in and optimize it. So, by the way, if you do the remove all junk on an object, then one of the things it gets rid of is those stupid animators that any sort of FBX import always wants to do. So that's handy as a quick shortcut using the Arcoman. Oh, I had realized I had that outside the window, so you couldn't see it. Anyway, remove all junk in the Arcoman thing, which under Arcin Object Manipulator, and then depending on what you've got selected, you can click it, remove all junk. If there's no junk, it doesn't hurt anything. So back to gimbals. So, okay, let's say hexagons are for static objects. As an aside, on these gimbals, I have got the material is just simply being the gold team color. It really doesn't matter because that gets written over as soon as it's instantiated anyway in the game, because whatever team color it is, that it uses their color, as you would think. But so whatever. If you want to, for visual organization's sake, arrange things slightly differently, then that's fine. I would appreciate it if you would actually do the creation of all the gimbals. It will save me a little bit of time, and it's one thing that doesn't really need me, I don't think. And then there's still the open question of whether either you or Blue are actually creating the actual icons there. I'm not sure which of you is going to be busiest at this point. I mean, she's overloaded for months, but you've also got quite a backlog. So, she's quick at making them, and I'm not sure how you'll feel about it with ProBuilder. One way or another, though, I really appreciated how you were going in and taking a look at these and getting their vertex counts down. So if you can continue to do that one way or the other, that is appreciated. And yeah, see, I don't know if this light capital ship icon will be batching or not. 253 hertz, that's on the borderline depending on what it's doing. It says it's only got tris and UVs in there, but dynamic batching, so fickle, so weird sometimes. I wish it wasn't such a black box. Me and everybody else who uses Unity. Okay, so at the moment, of course, you don't have a proper gimbal for these things. So Fighter Gimbal 1, I guess it's called here. So this will be Space Dock Gimbal instead. AI ships also need a gimbal, but they won't actually use the selection ring so far as I can think. Probably a good idea to still include it just in case. If somebody's like modding in the ability to control a AI unit, then we don't want it like going, oh, you can't select it because there's no, we're missing the gimbal selection ring. So, I mean, may as well. It gets turned off anyway when it's not selected, so it doesn't really add much of anything in the way of overhead. Talking a few kilobytes and nothing to the render. So, okay, so we got space dot gimbal. Space dock icon, which of course is actually the fighter icon right now, but there's nothing I can do about that. I'm going to double click on that so it takes me over to the correct spot. Now, this hexagon ring, I'm going to bring in here. I'm going to set this to 0. This hexagon ring is importing probably at 100 times too small. Let's see what we've got this circle importing as. Circles importing, rings importing, scale 1, hexagon ring, scale 1, scale 0.1, and yeah, so it's always inconsistent. I hate it. Maya just does weird stuff. There's just no other way to put it. So we'll try importing it at 100 so we don't have to resize it so much. It's going to be 7 times too big if that is correct, and it was correct. It's 7 times too big because 7.5 there. So now, whoa, boy, 2. I put in 2. That's not what I meant to do. All right, so now it's too small. So 2 is apparently actually much closer. So 1.5. 1.5, and then we'll do like 0.3 or something. You'll only we'll only ever have to do this like once with the see 0.05, 0.08. That looks pretty good. We'll only ever have to do this part once because of, just be reusing. Go with 1.7. That gives us the same. Basically, the hole inside is pretty circumscribed there, and it's at the exact same position. So hooray, easy peasy. Hexagon ring, you stay. Whoops. We'll actually get your gold texture first. And the quickest way to get it on there, just drag, ring, goodbye. Now the team color renderers, it has a reference to each thing. And as long as you don't actually change anything, you won't have to go into the Arcane Gimbal script at all. So if you just are editing an existing one, just rename, go in, change the fighter icon, and you're done. By the way, on renderers in general, there's a fix all mesh renderers thing that'll walk the tree of whatever selection you have and make some changes. And apparently I misclicked or something, but specifically it turns off. Why did it leave on receive shadows? That is not turn off receive shadows. Okay, well, turns off light and reflection probe usage, and turns off casting shadows. Oh, right. Receiving shadows. Yeah, we generally want to have that. Yeah, because we're getting shadows from the for ships, we're getting shadows from the sunlight. For these icon elements, these are unlit in a traditional sense, and instead are using this wacky shader that I made for them that I'm not sure I want to keep. Although, in fairness, each color can have its own separate shader and it won't make any difference. So what I'm thinking is that I may create some new shaders and use different ones for different colors, but none of that really matters for anything that you would be doing. But it's also something that any players who want to mod this and put in new colors of their own can do. And it might seem crazy to anybody who's listening that you have to come in and mod the game to add a color, but it's a little more sophisticated than a color because it's actually a selection of colors and how exactly it looks as material, what the flame trails are like, and that sort of thing. We could have gone with just diffuse. Pick your color on the by diffuse I mean multiplicative color to the vertices. So pick your color off of the palette, like in Photoshop or MS Paint or whatever, and we will just splash that color onto the mesh. But that is very ugly and doesn't show details very well, and you get no subtlety. Like, this is not yellow. This is like gold with orangish like fire bits. That's cool. So and the trail renderers, they match, so you can tell. So right now I've only got 5-ish colors set up, but I can set up plenty more. And if modders or whatever want to set them up, they can do so. And if they want to let us integrate that into the main game, we can do that as well, so that nobody has to download a mod just to get colors. So I mean, we can work collaboratively on that sort of thing. So space.gimbal, that is now set up, aside from it having the wrong mesh in there. So since the two things you would be doing specifically are, okay, so it's time for a new gimbal. You come over, duplicate something that has the right circle selection ring on it. So either structure, flagshipy type thing, or regular squad. And then just Control D duplicate. and then rename it, and so we can tell what it is if there's ever errors or whatever. Then go into the icon and select the appropriate model, or more likely drag and drop it over into there, and hit apply, and you're done, almost. Because then you have to actually, now going over back to our space dock here where we started, we have to actually put the icon prefab, which is the gimbal, into that slot. And you will notice that in the editor, this does nothing. In this prep project, it does absolutely nothing. But in the game, it will start showing a gimbal above it with, of course, the wrong icon since we don't have the real icon yet, and so on and so forth. Tell you what, let's do this just to be clear about how busted this is. Let's find a default mesh, because I've been using like the really white meshes materials for ships in order to make it really clear that those things are incorrect. And so let's make ourselves a cube, and no collider on it, and fix all mesh renderers, and turn off the shadows since this is a actual interface-ish type element. Okay, and I'm going to resize the rest of this by hand. Boom. If people can't tell that this is a icon needed here, then there's no helping that. So I'll go ahead and just under the gimbals here, I'm just going to drag this cube out here so that we have it handy so you can put it in any one of the shapes. Now this is a child of space dock icon here. Let's do this. Gold, apply. Ooh, that looks nice. That looks really cool, actually. It makes it look like it's got more roundedness to its tangents and normals, or its normals, than it really does. That's surprising. So we'll call this space dock icon again, and we'll drag this in, hit apply. So now whenever there's something that doesn't have an icon yet, we're not seeing some inexplicable icon where we're wondering, is that the fighter, or is that actually like something that doesn't have an icon now? It's like, it's the square. What is that? It's one of those ones that doesn't have an icon yet. So hooray. Okay, anyway, so you'll just swap in the stuff for the thing that is missing, its icon, and we'll do that in just a second. So, all right, space dock is set up. That was already half set up anyway, so I was correcting it. Now looking at the AI Warp Gate here. Now, this is not set up in any way, shape, or form at the moment. This thing, do I want to do that in this video? Yeah, I do. Okay, so we'll go ahead and plow on through. All right, so what we have to do is create an object that will be the parent. So the easiest way to do that is to go ahead and create empty inside it. We'll call this AI Warp Gate, and then pull it out. Why did we create it under this? It's so it would center it on where the parent object is. So now we can swap which one's the parent, which one's the child, and everything's happy. Now, at this point, you can always use these for reference. So clicking over to Space Dock, you can just go ahead and copy component of the Arkin visual object and possibly save yourself some hassle. Paste that on in. Okay, selection circle, nah. Oh, hover scale, that was still on there. No hover scale. I'm probably going to take that off, honestly. But anyway, we don't need a billboard text mesh. We use that on a few things like the wormholes, but very rare. Child to duplicate, definitely not space dock. It's going to be the AI Warp Gate here. Incidentally, go ahead and click to this, and AI Warp Gate, that prefab can go bye-bye. Oh, it's unlinked. It doesn't have a prefab anymore. Now we have a prefab. Don't forget to put it back in the asset bundle of AI War 2 goodie box. You can do save all assets here to make sure that it's updated things, and it hadn't. You'll notice it took 0.6 or 0.06 seconds the first time, signifying it had something to save. Something wasn't written all the way into the asset cache. Not asset cache, into the asset database. So space dock gimbal, incorrect, but that's fine. This is also a structure for all intents and purposes. So we'll duplicate space dock gimbal, and we'll just call that AI Warp Gate Gimbal. And same thing here. Can I do that in here? AI Warp Gate Gimbal. The double clicking doesn't work on the side over there. Oh, come on. Hey, it showed it as changed. Why is it not updating the editor? Concerning. How about save all assets? Yep. So it just hadn't updated the asset database. There, 0.33 seconds. Wow, that was a slow update. All right, AI Warp Gate Gimbal, done. Since we don't have an actual icon. Later, we just swap in the icon mesh, and then it's done for real. So AI Warp Gate Gimbal, so we get the right thing. Apply. We're almost done. At this point, though, the layer is still default, and you don't want to make that selectable ship because it's just less efficient. There's really no reason for that. Make it targetable ship, and yes, change children, apply. That should, unless I messed up any code with that in recent times, that should make it so that we can hover over it, right click it to attack, and all that sort of thing, but not make it so that we can actually select it, which, since it's not on our side, it wouldn't select anyway. Somebody modded it to be on our side, then it being that layer would be an issue, but that layer can be changed at runtime without much hassle. So if we really have to get into that sort of thing, then we can do so later. Okay, so now we have two ships that should be set up correctly. Now I'm going to go ahead, go Arkin, build Windows Asset Bundle. It's going to take a little bit to do that. While it's doing that, this AI Warp Gate is not defined in the XML for the ships anywhere. So we need to go ahead and do that, I think. I don't think it's in here. Yeah, AI guard post we have, but not that. So I'll go ahead and just duplicate the guard post instead. So this is called AI Warp Gate. Now, when you are, first of all, when you're actually naming it, having it named the same is nice, but you can really call it whatever you want. That won't make any difference. In terms of what systems they use, since some of that is going to be changing pretty soon anyway, you just leave that alone. And the strength cost, I don't even know what that is. I don't think that's staying. Oh, well, maybe that is. It's probably an AI thing. Anyway, max health, you just leave it alone. Structure, yeah. Speed 0, sure. Behavior stationary, yeah. These things all make sense for the warp gate. Description, tilde star tilde, that's keys in my symbol to come back to it. Display name, we do want to change that. AI warp gate. Category ship, in other words, it's not a shot or whatever. Radius 80, it's probably too small, but I have some work to do on that front in general. Special entity type tells it where to load in. A lot of times, well, honestly, that'll probably be AI Warp Gate later because it tells it how to use it. Because these entities have no real connection to anything because they're raw data, and so the game needs some way to understand what is this, like, because these are just as good as a modded. It's all the same as modding basically, and so um, if it needs to be something super specific that's used in a strategic fashion, like, hey, every AI planet gets one AI warp gate, well, then it needs to have a type of, I assume, AI warp gate. But Keith hasn't added that yet, so it doesn't really matter right now. So we could probably just leave special entity type off. However, for testing purposes, to make sure we did our work right, we're going to do something else, which I will show you. The next thing, though, is ooh, well, there's a bug right there. The AI guard post. Not a bug, but a typo. Okay, so the visuals thing is a link. Is the URL inside the asset bundle of um, where this thing is and what it's called. Um, all the things we're going to be linking to directly have a .prefab extension. Um, These all have to be completely lowercase, regardless of what the original casing was on the other side. Unity's rules, not mine. Control U will automatically lowercase things, which is nice. However, the URL on these is wrong. By the way, you do have to use forward slashes. Assets, arc, and bundle other goes to like the wormholes and stuff. And so clearly when I was copy pasting around some stuff, I copy pasted a little bit too much. So it should be structures and then I believe AI warp gate. Yeah. And so there we go. We do also have the AI controller, which I seem not to have saved in here. That's interesting. I'll let you set that one up. It's not in the asset bundle or anything. It's using AI command right now for AI command home, not home, but AI command station. And that really should be AI controller now. Special entity type would stay AI command station, but then go ahead and delete that prefab, rebuild the bundle, do all the setup on it, rename it to AI controller, and you should be good to go. When you control click through to other planets or tab out to the galaxy map and click through to other planets, you should see it just showing up properly, and you can hover over it and all those sort of things. So there's a good first, exercise for the reader. At the moment, with this AI warp gate that I'm going to test, this is the thing of relevance. Special entity type test ship. Only one ship should have that at a time, and that is specifically so that it will give that to the player, stick it next to their home, well, right now it's a home command station, but it'll be the ARC later. And as we de-AI or classic-ish this data, and that way we can look at it, make sure that it's right without having to go like find it in the game somewhere. You don't really need to do that with the AI command stations because those are everywhere. AI warp gates that would be the same, except of course they're not and in the seeding logic yet. So I'm sure the asset bundle finished building. It complained about Sun Tower base. Yeah, that's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and clear the log. Sun Tower Base is just some other asset that's in there that I need to deal with at some point. It's not even included in the asset bundle, but it complains on build. All right, so we start a new game. Now, you can see these things here. Interesting. So it's, oh, yeah. The gimbal itself is always selectable. Okay, well, yeah. So we can see that it's seeding in and doing all the stuff it's supposed to do anyway. And of course, it's in just the flat white right now, not being ready. So that looks kind of weird. But, oh, and we can hover over this AI Warp Gate. We can't hover over this. Yeah, that's going to bug me. We really should, decode error? What the heck? Audio clips. It's having trouble decoding some of the audio player. Huh. Well, that's a surprise. Something for later. So I tell you what, let's go ahead anyway and make all of this stuff selectable ships, even on the enemy side. Because that'll make all the tooltips and everything work fine. And it's just, in the end, for people who might be modding, it's going to be more straightforward if they want to add something to their side. And if we're testing and we want to put something on our side and test ordering it around, then that's helpful. Look how fast that builds. I may leave the Sun Tower Base thing in there, actually, because it gives us a clue, hey, I'm done. Otherwise, there's no message saying, yeah, we finished building the asset bundle for real. It just gives you control of it back. Okay, so now I should be able to... Oh, that's my problem. Okay. So space dock, hover over that, works fine. Select it, hooray. You can select this, hooray. You can give it orders and stuff, but of course it can't go anywhere. It's not allowed to, it's stationary. What's wrong with this one? This one, even though I set the thing right, it's still wrong. So, oopsies. One guess. What don't you see here? Here we see it, here we don't, here we do. We're missing the bounding box. No, we've got my custom bounding box thing that I made for Raptor in here, thank goodness, right? And it's just something I forgot to put in on this particular thing. Unfortunately, it's going to put it in at 1x1 units, but this needs to be on the parent. And if you try and put it on the child, depends on if the child is scaled a bunch. Let's try it. So we can add a component of box collider here, and still just did 1x1. Oh, well, of course it did, because there's, yeah, see, these things all have scales on them. And so there's, that nice snapping that it can do, it's not gonna. So that means that we're down to good old by hand doing it. And at least we can do it thanks to the box collider thing that I just can't use Unity's regular box collider thing. It's so bad. Can't tell. No, not enough perspective. All right, that's good enough. Don't want to be too loose, but I do want people to be able to click that. And being able to click that far under doesn't matter to me. So good enough for government work. I know you think that's hilarious given your background. Not your sort of government work. Okay, so that builds. Over here, it doesn't even take a recompile or anything because that's runtime loaded in chunks as needed on demand. Happy times. Start new game, bing. So now when I hover over this, obviously this tooltip is tiny and horrible, but you actually can hover over it, and I can click it too to get that thing selected. There may be improvements that we make to, visual feedback on certainly hovering, but also like selecting and stuff. But it's not anything that really matters to how we set these up, I don't think. So, yeah, that is setting up an AI ship and a player ship and fixing them, doing them from scratch and fixing them. Yeah, make sure it's in the asset bundle, do all these other steps, Arco manage your friend, save all assets just to be sure. Yeah. See, it was putting it in the asset bundle, but it wasn't fully in the asset database. If I close this version of this instance of Unity and then came back in, it may have lost some of my stuff. And then next time I rebuilt the asset bundle, suddenly something's missing or not working. Stupid thing. Right. And so then just do our general check-in. Since we have multiple projects, you really do have to go to the AI War 2 Ultra root directory, whatever you wind up calling it, and check all that stuff in from there. Since I was missing something with scale examples, I'm going to check that in. If you would mind not checking in changes to scale examples, that would be appreciated because we're likely to run into conflicts since that's a binary file that it can't do any diffing with. But obviously with KDL ships and all the prefabs that you're specifically working on, please do check those in. So work from during video for Cinth. Yeah, that is not a great check-in note set, but such is life. So yeah, I will hand you models with their animations and whatnot set up and with them scaled, rather much like this. It doesn't have a proper parent. It looks like it might, but actually this is controlling like some of the rotation and some of the other things like that. And so you need to create a new parent for it and delete the prefab, relink the prefab and all that jazz. So, but yeah, I'll be handing you things like that. And then if you can get them in there, get them in the XML, and then later, Blue will be handing us repeats of the cruddy things that I made. So I mean, here's my arc. This is another one to add, by the way. If you have the AI controller for the AI regular planets, and then the player arc for right now we've got this structure of command station there that needs to go away. It doesn't need fixing, it just needs to go away because we don't have command stations anymore. Instead we have the arc. And so if you can replace that with my cruddy thing, there's not really even any point in optimizing that one. That's a separate video anyway, because Blue's almost done with that anyway. She will be done either today or within a couple of days. It would surprise me if she's not done today with it. And so we just optimize that one once it's in. If there's something that looks likely to stick around for a substantial length of time, since she's booked up making these things for the next 3 months or 4 months, whatever it is, then it'll probably be worth it to optimize them and then optimize my junk ones, unfortunately, and then go back and optimize hers, which is creates double work. But what you gonna do when you got to have performance during a testing period with players with varying hardware? So All good. So yes, if you can do the arc, and if you get rid of the command station, do the AI, whatever that thing's AI controller. I never can remember that. And get rid of the AI command. Then that's a good first go. The AI guard posts obviously will be going away too, but because those are all guardians now, is my understanding. But I have to do some at least junk models for those first, and get the proper format stuff from Keith. I assume that he's been working on the UI right now, but I assume he's going to be going in and making some updates pretty soon to uh, the Galaxy seeding code. But a lot of that's dependent on us getting the ships ready for him to be able to do that. So chicken and the egg sort of a thing. All right. Thanks for watching.